He is a retired U.S. Army officer, former history instructor at West Point, and he also served tours in both Iraq and Afghanistan. It's an honor to have you with us, Major. Thanks so much. Let's start with, you've written an article on TruthDig, which I find absolutely fascinating. It's about what's going on right now in Syria. And while most Republicans, most of the media, and many Democrats are blasting the president for what he's done, you have an interesting take on it. Share it with us.
Well, you know, I think it's utter hypocrisy that the foreign policy elites across the spectrum, partisan-wise, and then also the mainstream media, you know, they'll blast anything Trump does. I mean, they're so reflexively anti-Trump that no matter what he does, they're going to attack it. You know, my take on Syria, for example, it's complex. I'm in favor of pulling U.S. military forces out of Syria. In fact, I've been writing about that for years. I think that the mission was vague. I think it was ill-advised, and it was all risk and no reward. What concerns me is that it appears that Trump has green-lighted a possible military operation that really will add up to, if not genocide, certainly ethnic cleansing, as the Turks come in, attack the Kurds, and then apparently want to resettle Sunni Arabs from Idlib, refugees, get them out of Turkey and put them into Syria, which is only going to make the situation worse. Now, the big thing to understand here, and what my article is about, is not that Trump's wrong for pulling out. I think we shouldn't have been there in the first place. My point is, we have to look at the context of what happens when the United States military intervenes, hyper-intervenes across the greater Middle East, from West Africa to Central Asia. What happens is we carve out an illegal sort of, you know, canton or statelet, and we create even more problems. We befriend people on the ground who we never intend to stand by, and then as soon as we leave, the political right and the mainstream left both tell us, well, no, we can't leave now. In fact, we have to stay forever, because if we don't, then what about women's rights in Afghanistan? What about Kurdish rights in Syria? So what this does is it creates a situation of perpetual warfare.
It's interesting that you would say that, because a lot of people are arguing we can't leave now because of the Kurds. Oh, poor Kurds. The Turks are going to go after the Kurds, and somehow we are responsible if that were to happen. But I do ask myself, and ask you as well, at what point do we stop picking a side or defending a side and just leaving them to their own business? Well,
I think that the original sin of the American mission in Syria, which is really just a microcosm of the American mission in the greater Middle East since at least 9/11, is that we intervened in the first place. It was illegal. Nobody invited the United States into Syria. Nobody invited our Air Force or our Green Berets. What we did was carve out a sanctuary, carve out a little American-backed statelet in northeast Syria. And we took it upon ourselves to do that because we think that Uncle Sam has the right to unzip the American inside every Syrian, inside every Kurd, inside every Afghan, etc. And all we do is actually end up destabilizing a region, creating new conflicts. And look, here's what I think. When Turkey invades, expect the Kurds, and this isn't necessarily a bad thing, to reach back out to Assad and the Syrian regime forces who are backed by Russia and Iran. Because what really needs to happen is some sort of deal, some sort of rapprochement, whether we like it or not, between Bashar al-Assad, who, bad as he is the sovereign ruler of Syria, the victor in the civil war, and some sort of deal needs to be made with the Kurds, because if not, there's going to be a new phase in what has already been a multi-phased civil war in Syria, and this time it'll include Turkey, Russia, Iran. In fact, Iran is drilling troops on the Turkish border. As of today, it's been reported, because they're not about to stand aside and let Turkey invade and intervene. Because let's remember, Turkey backed the al-Qaeda forces in the Syrian civil war. Turkey looked the other way and became the main transit point for ISIS fighters coming into Syria. So these are not friends, right? These are not people, you know, they're in NATO, but they are not in the interest of American security or of stability in Syria.
Major Sjursen, unbelievable to have this conversation with you, especially based on the fact that you have the gravitas to be able to talk about some of the things that you are talking about. After all, you taught at West Point, you've done tours of duty, you're a major. My goodness, it's a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for sharing your insight on this story with us.